So my name is Mike Barnard. I own Rakestraw Books in Danville, California, and for the last few months I've been on the Indies Introduced panel, and I'm here today with Matthew Griffin, who's the author of Hyde, which comes out February the 16th from Bloomsbury. First novel, absolutely great read. So I'm going to ask him a few questions and talk to him about the book. And I guess, first off, how did this story come to you?
Yeah, so it came to me in a way that really surprised me, which was that I was after working on a completely different novel for 5 years, I realized that novel was never going to work, and it just never fundamentally came to life for me. And so after a few days of depression and wandering about the house like a ghost, I went back through it and started pulling out the pieces of it, the very few tiny pieces of it that felt alive to me, and all of those were about my grandparents in some way, some sort of tangential way. And so I started thinking about them and having watched them sort of take care of each other at the ends of their lives and, how difficult that was for them. And so I started thinking about them and their relationships and what it would have taken to have sustained a relationship over such a long period of time, and also how it would feel after 50 years as that relationship inevitably slips away. And then on top of that, I started thinking what it would be like to have that experience with the added pressures of having been a gay person in the 20th century, with all the sort of dangers that would add on to that already sort of profoundly difficult experience of losing the person that you built your life around. And so from there, the characters and the voice all really came alive really quickly for me.
It's not often that we see rural gay characters in fiction, that we see older characters in gay fiction. And so those seem to me profound differences, and something that was very unusual about this novel. Did you ever consider setting it in a different context, or?
I didn't really, because one of the things I wanted to do was tell a story about gay people that it seemed like I hadn't read before. And so many of the books about gay people that I've read, they tend to focus on people younger people in urban settings, when statistically, although those are real centers of gay culture, like statistically, it seems to me that most gay people aren't living in those places, right? And so I wanted to tell a story that people who didn't live there could see themselves reflected in. And also, I'm from North Carolina, and so it sort of naturally came to me, the setting, and it felt really, also because my grandparents all came from North Carolina, and so that place felt really central to those characters.
Did you feel like you were writing about a particular place? In creating this community?
Yeah, I did. I mean, in a lot of ways, so I grew up in Greensboro, North Carolina, and in a lot of ways the town in the book is a sort of bizarro world version of Greensboro. I mean, Greensboro is still sort of like a pretty thriving city, partially because it has so many colleges and universities there. And so I was thinking more about this sort of mill town aspect of it, with the denim plants and the furniture market and all of that industry, which other towns in North Carolina have suffered a lot more as those industries have waned. And so the town in the book is sort of a combination of Greensboro and those sort of smaller industrial towns.
It has a really strong sense of place. And that was one of the things that I liked about it. So who else do you read? Who else influenced you as a writer?
So Herman Melville is really close to my heart. And I read Moby Dick whenever I need a shot of bravery, which is helpful. I also, when I was reading this, Marilynne Robinson is one of my favorite writers, and I think her work was really influential as I was writing this, even though I think, the characters and just the nature of this book is a lot different from her work, but particularly Gilead being sort of about an older character facing his fairly imminent death. That was in my mind a lot. I love Jennifer Egan too. There's actually one point where I wrote this whole weird subplot that never worked it was like 100 pages that I ended up cutting out. Because at one point I realized I was like, I was just ripping off that one chapter from A Visit from the Goon Squad about Rob. And so, I got rid of that. Yeah.
Totally wise.
Yeah.
What are you working on now?
So right now I'm slowly trying to move my way towards writing a new novel. that I think will be very different from this. Although I'm always very hesitant to start talking about what I'm working on. I think having had the experience of working on something for 5 years and then it completely failing,
Right.
I'm super cautious about it. But I think especially because this book is very, like, all the main characters are men. And so I am thinking about a novel that's focused on a female main character, which I think is as far as which is the broadest terms one could ever say about what they're working on now. Yeah.
So when you think about this book reaching readers, what do you see happening? Where do you want to be part of that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I've thought about the most is sort of like the books that shaped me when I was a teenager, and the importance of seeing yourself reflected in fiction and the way that shapes you at that particular time when you're really still figuring out who you are as a person. And so I think for me, what I would hope as it moves out into the world is that, like, a few teenagers maybe read this book, right, particularly gay teenagers, and see the possibility for an actually happy life, right? Granted, a life that still has its struggles and its difficulties, as they all do, but for them to be able to see the possibility of love and happiness.
That's great. Well, introducing you around last night, the excitement of people who've read the book already, and the eagerness that people who've heard about the book are looking forward to reading. I think you're going to have a real success. And I think the thing that struck me in reading was how fresh the voice was, and these were not stock characters. This was not a setting that we usually see. They were not an age and a class of character that we often see in fiction, period, let alone in gay fiction. And that was part of what drove our excitement for the book. And then, of course, the quality of the writing. So
Well, thank you.
I think you'll have every success.